He arrived long before dawn, a solitary figure moving through the vast, sterile expanse of the elite training facility. A mop glided silently across the polished concrete floor of the main hall, a practiced motion repeated countless times. His hood was always up, obscuring his face, eyes cast down. No one paid him any mind, not the early instructors, not the recruits who would soon fill the space with grunts and groans. He was simply maintenance, a civilian contractor listed generically on the duty roster. He was an almost invisible fixture, emptying bins, wiping sweat from equipment, and cleaning mirrors no one ever thanked him for. He never spoke unless absolutely necessary, and even then, his replies were clipped and brief. Then, one brisk morning, a young recruit, Leo Vance, bent down to retie a loose bootlace. He froze. Just behind the man's ear, barely visible beneath the edge of his faded collar, was a tattoo. It was an old mark, almost faded into the tanned, scarred skin, the kind of ink earned only by a very specific, rare group of individuals, and only after enduring trials no one in their right mind would ever speak of. This isn't just a story. It's a testament to the quiet power that often walks among us, unseen. If you believe such stories deserve to be told, hit that subscribe button and help us honor those who carry burdens silently. The Apex Combat Readiness Center, as the facility was officially known, was unlike any regular gym. It wasn't about flashy equipment or loud music. It was hallowed ground, where every individual understood that pushing beyond limits meant pain, and pain was the crucible of transformation. The air vibrated with the sound of heavy plates, strained breathing, and the sharp commands of instructors. Candidates pushed through circuits until their hands were raw and bleeding, driven harder than most human minds could possibly endure. And yet, every day, before the clang of steel and the shouts began, there he was, mopping, sweeping, restocking, and then, just as silently, disappearing. Most of the younger recruits barely even registered his presence, too consumed with the overwhelming challenge of merely surviving each day. But some of the older instructors, seasoned veterans themselves, had started to notice subtle peculiarities. The meticulous way he folded towels, always perfectly tight. The precise manner in which he stacked weight plates, balanced by weight, not just size. And the way he observed the new recruits in the reflective surfaces of the gym, never staring, just an almost imperceptible scan, as if assessing. He never wore headphones, never carried a phone. And while he moved with the steady pace of a man who carried the weight of years, there was something unaged about him. His knees didn't crack when he crouched low. His hands didn't tremble. When he moved a 50-pound dumbbell from one rack to another, he did it with a grip that seemed utterly unaffected by the passage of decades. Recruits sometimes joked about him, whispering that he was probably some washout from a previous training cycle or a disillusioned former athlete. One even quipped, he probably tried out years ago and couldn't hack it. But Major Thorne, a formidable former squad leader and one of the most respected instructors, had shut down such talk with a single piercing glance. Thorne was tough, a man of few words, and had no patience for disrespect. Even he, however, avoided direct eye contact with the janitor when they crossed paths. The military base had employed countless civilian contractors over the years. Kitchen staff, drivers, administrative workers, but few ever lasted long. The hours were brutal, the security protocols intrusive, and the high-pressure environment simply too much for most. But this man was different. He never complained, never took a day off, never got in anyone's way. The only consistent detail anyone remembered was his hood. Always up, even indoors, even in the sweltering heat of summer. One sweltering summer morning, just after a grueling strength circuit, a recruit named Marcus Cole collapsed onto a bench, gasping for air. He leaned forward, trying to steady his breathing, and glanced sideways at the janitor, who was calmly wiping down the nearby floor. The hood had slipped, just enough to reveal a patch of sun-darkened, scarred skin behind his ear. And there it was, the tattoo, barely visible under his collar. Cole stared, blinking sweat from his eyes. It wasn't a casual design. It wasn't tribal or generic. It was unequivocally military, very specific. a stylized dagger piercing a stylized lion's head. The kind of emblem worn only by operators who had successfully completed clandestine, highly classified missions, operations that were never acknowledged on paper. The kind of ink no one outside those specific, unconfirmed teams would ever possess or dare to wear. Cole didn't speak immediately. He simply watched as the janitor straightened, adjusted his hood, and walked away, silent as always, his mop bucket trailing behind him as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But from that moment on, Cole couldn't shake the image, and neither could the rest of the compound. Cole kept quiet that day. He wasn't even entirely sure what he'd seen. Perhaps it was a trick of the light, or his exhaustion playing tricks on his mind, filling in blanks. But the image was seared into his memory. The distinct angle of the ink, the unique style of the lines, the faded clarity that spoke only of years spent under harsh sun. That night, alone in his bunk, he researched. He scrolled through obscure online forums he wasn't supposed to know about, discussions of unconfirmed special ops, clandestine teams, rumored missions. Most of it was baseless speculation, but some of the images he found matched. Not exact duplicates, but close enough. Dagger, lion, covert. The next morning, Cole kept a discreet eye on the janitor, not overtly staring, just observing. He wasn't alone. Others had noticed a subtle shift in the gym's atmosphere. The instructors began to hesitate around him. The ranking officers didn't rush him. And Major Thorne, the former squad leader, watched him differently now. Not with caution or suspicion, but more like someone trying to gauge the distance between who they currently were and who they might once have served alongside. Finally, someone dared to speak. It was a powerfully built recruit named Ben Carter, who had failed a previous cycle and returned with a hardened edge. He made the mistake of calling out, half-joking, "Hey, old-timer, ever done more than just clean up sweat?" The gym went quiet. No one actually stopped their training, but the ambient noise subtly changed, a collective holding of breath. The janitor didn't turn, didn't flinch. He just continued mopping the blood-stained corner of the mat where two candidates had gone too hard during grappling practice. Carter chuckled awkwardly. "Guess not." And then Major Thorne walked over to Carter.
"No yelling, no threats."
He simply leaned in and whispered, "If you intend to complete this program, I suggest you shut your mouth and show some damn respect." That changed everything. Carter didn't utter another word for the rest of the day. Word spread quickly, quietly. Some recruits started calling him the Shadow. Others simply referred to him as Sir, without truly knowing why. He never responded to any of it, but his presence perceptibly altered. He was still silent, still early, still seemingly invisible by routine. But now people noticed him. He moved as if constantly mapping the room, his eyes always tracking potential exits, weaknesses, and the posture of those around him. Some whispered he knew who would fail the program even before the instructors did. Then, one afternoon, an incident occurred that no one could ignore. The fire alarm blared during a heavy weight circuit, a false trigger, a technical malfunction from a newly installed control panel. According to protocol, the gym was immediately evacuated. Most recruits jogged out, instructors following them. But one trainee, Mark Davis, collapsed midway, an old knee injury, exacerbated by dehydration, locking up completely. Two other recruits went back in to help, but froze near the entrance as smoke from the faulty wires began to fill the hallway. It wasn't yet dangerous, but it would have taken a medic team at least 5 minutes to respond. It took the janitor 30 seconds. He walked directly into the wisps of smoke. No hesitation, no protective gear, just a damp towel wrapped loosely around his mouth. He carried Davis out on his back. Not a struggle, not a drag. A clean, perfect fireman's carry. One arm securing the leg behind the knee, the other across the shoulder, controlling the balance as if he'd rehearsed it for years. Davis weighed 220 pounds. The janitor didn't grunt once. When he emerged, eyes red but steady, he laid Davis gently on the mat and stepped back without a word. The fire chief arrived moments later. The building was cleared. All safe, all fine. No one officially talked about it. No official report mentioned his name. But everyone had witnessed it. The precision, the unwavering calm, the instinctive reflex. Later that evening, as Cole walked past the janitor's cart, he noticed something new. A small, subtle patch sewn inside the front pocket, barely visible. Black thread on black fabric. Letters. Faded but clear if you looked close enough. Alpha 7. A unit so clandestine, it didn't officially confirm its members. A unit that left no paper trails. A unit that, effectively, made its operators disappear when they retired, if they retired. And suddenly, everything made profound, unsettling sense. The next morning, everything felt different. Not because anyone said anything out loud, but because no one did. There were no more jokes, no more dismissive glances, no more whispered questions in locker corners. Just a quiet, palpable shift in energy, as if the entire room had decided to recalibrate itself around someone they had all profoundly misjudged. The janitor still arrived at the same hour, still swept the same stretch of rubber flooring. But now, people stepped aside when he passed, not out of fear, but out of something far heavier, respect. The kind you don't demand, the kind you earn long before anyone ever truly sees it. Major Thorne watched closely. He had been unusually quiet since the fire alarm incident. He hadn't approached the janitor. Not yet. But that morning, as the recruits finished their warm-up sprints, he walked over to the supply closet where the janitor usually disappeared for 10 minutes during breaks. He knocked once, opened the door, and stepped inside. The janitor was sitting on an overturned bucket, drinking black coffee from a dented thermos. He looked up slowly, his eyes calm, unreadable. Thorne didn't sit. He just stood there for a moment, then spoke. "I was in Hellman Province, 09 to 10. You were with an Alpha team then, weren't you?" The janitor didn't answer. Thorne nodded once, as if that silence was all the confirmation he needed. "There was a story," he continued. "A black op outside Lushkar. Rescue mission. Zero intel. No air support. 2 men went in. Only one came out. They said the one who made it back carried the other for half a mile under fire, stitched his own leg with a combat knife, and disappeared before the debrief. No name, just gone." The janitor stared at him. No expression, no reaction. Thorne took a breath. "Was that you?" A pause. Then, finally, the janitor spoke. His voice was calm, low. "You shouldn't ask questions you don't want answered." Thorne didn't smile. "That's what I thought." He turned to leave but paused at the door. "They think they're learning discipline in that gym. But you're teaching them something else. Something none of us can put on a whiteboard." The janitor looked down at his scuffed boots. "They'll need it, if they ever see what I've seen." And just like that, Thorne was gone. Word didn't spread, not out loud, but something profound changed in the days that followed. One morning, a group of instructors arrived to find the janitor's locker door slightly ajar. Inside was a folded national flag, a single pair of worn desert boots, and an old military challenge coin resting atop a faded name patch. The name read, Kane. No first name, no rank, just 5 faded letters. That afternoon, Leo Vance gathered enough courage to walk over while Kane was coiling a heavy battle rope for storage. "Sir," he said quietly, "if you were really one of them, then why are you here?" Kane didn't stop coiling the rope. He just answered, "Because this is where they need me." Vance hesitated. "Why not tell anyone?" Kane finally looked him in the eye. "The day you need to tell people who you are is the day you've already forgotten." Then he stood up, wiped his hands on a rag, and walked away. Vance never asked again. But that night, he stared at the symbolic dagger patch in his own locker a little longer. And when he went to bed, he slept knowing that the man sweeping the mats might be the last, silent line between their world and the one no one ever speaks of. From that day forward, no one called him the janitor anymore. Not out loud. He was still listed that way in the roster, still punched in on the civilian time card, still signed every equipment request with a name no one dared repeat without lowering their voice. But around the compound, in the minds of every recruit and instructor who had caught even a glimpse of the tattoo on his neck or the deep silence in his stare, he was something else entirely. Kane became part of the air, a quiet, almost spectral presence who moved through the gym with profound purpose. Never demanding anything, never interfering, but somehow always watching. Recruits began training harder when he was around. They stopped complaining about the cold showers, about sore knees, about the brutal demands of making the cut. No one explicitly told them to. They just did. Because in the presence of a man who had nothing left to prove and everything to silently carry, their petty excuses died a quiet death. One night after lights out, Leo Vance pulled aside one of the new candidates and said, "If you ever see him watching you, don't try to impress him. Just don't screw up." The kid didn't understand yet, but he would. Major Thorne, meanwhile, never brought it up again. Not in briefings, not in reports. He didn't need to. Once, during a short break between sessions, he left a folded note inside Kane's supply cart. No signature, just 3 words, "You're still serving." Kane never mentioned it, but the next morning, the battle ropes were coiled tighter than usual, and the squat racks had already been disinfected before anyone else arrived. The compound's senior staff never formally acknowledged what they suspected. No background check had ever turned up a military record. No official service file matched the man with that face. But those who truly understood how special operations worked knew that the most effective warriors were often the ones who deliberately left no paperwork behind. One afternoon, a visiting commander from a naval base recognized him. He was walking past the open gym doors when he stopped dead, stared, then whispered to Major Thorne, "You have no idea who that is, do you?" Thorne replied without looking, "No, but I know exactly what he is." The commander didn't ask more. He just nodded, a knowing gesture, and walked away. The gym kept running. Recruits kept sweating. Instructors kept shouting. But every so often, when someone dropped a barbell without control, or slammed a locker door too loudly, or spoke out of turn, Kane would subtly appear in the corner of their eye, just a second too early, just enough to make them instinctively straighten up. And sometimes, in those rare, quiet moments before sunrise, he would stop beside the large mirror, lower his hood, and look at the face staring back. The tattoo on his neck, once hidden, now faded with time and sweat, still spoke louder than any salute ever could. He never told anyone his story. He never revealed his rank, his missions, or the names of the men who didn't come home. He just kept mopping the mats, coiling the ropes, scrubbing the blood from the tiles, until every recruit who passed through that gym understood that legends don't always stand on podiums. Sometimes, they push mop buckets at 4 a.m., silently ensuring that the next generation knows exactly what it means to truly serve. He never wore a uniform, never gave direct orders, never asked for thanks. He simply showed up early, quietly, seemingly unnoticed, and did the work no one else thought mattered. But behind that mop and beneath that hood was a story no one could imagine, and a past that still stood silent watch over a place built for the strongest. Because sometimes the men who've seen the worst don't tell you what they did. They show you how to carry it. So now I ask you, have you ever crossed paths with someone like him? Someone the world overlooked, until a small detail, a quiet gesture, or a single glance revealed the immense weight they were silently carrying. Share their name in the comments. Tell us what they taught you, because here on Human Stories, we honor the ones who don't ask for recognition, only for respect. Thank you for watching. If the story moved you, share it, subscribe. Help us keep alive the quiet power of those who never stopped serving, even when the world stopped watching. And next time you pass by someone sweeping a floor, look closer.